first, and then I think the pilot team.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I think that's something that certainly I wouldn't let that be the linchpin.
Sorry, Joe. It's the linchpin for us because we are seeking ATO at this point, and so that's why.
You should then apply for the split thing.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, Jen was at Katie Arrington's presentation.
All right, welcome back to the Nexus Podcast. I'm here from RSA. Cassie Crossley, Vice President of Supply Chain Security at Schneider Electric, is my guest. And we'll talk about something I don't know about, which is hardware, bills of materials. So I'm very glad you're here to kind of explain what you want to lighten this all on.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. How's the show going for you? We're at the tail end.
Good. Definitely exhausting. Always is. But I love it. I love seeing people I know and meeting new people.
So like I said, do they call them HBOMs? It's kind of
They do. Just don't do it in an airport.
Yeah, not a good idea.
Yeah.
Definitely not a good idea. So, honestly, I haven't heard a lot about this.
Sure.
Why isn't there more buzz about this? I heard about SBOM.
Yeah.
Right. So, well, many things that we have in our life, they're software only. So, what's on your laptop, lots of software. And really, as a consumer or just a normal IT staff or anybody else, do you really want to know all the details inside the laptop? Does it matter? Probably only when there's a vulnerability or something major
developing a strategy right now
in the past when there's chips that could potentially fix and break computers or stuff like that. So from a hardware standpoint, the bill of materials is not generally necessary unless you're doing repairs or unless you're concerned about something that will be put inside whatever it is you're buying. So that's why you don't.
Again, I think
got it. But structurally, it's basically the same. It's just a component list and machine readable list.
Yeah, so it's hardware bill of materials could be everything in there, which could be non-intelligent components, non-digital components. So it could have, capacitors or just, anything, right? You've all seen green boards, those are printed circuit boards. So
we've demonstrated it 1,000 times. Actually, we have over 1,000.
So generally, when we're talking about hardware bill of materials and we're giving it to someone, we focus on the intelligent components, the integrated circuits.
So we're doing it there.
Basically that, because otherwise it'd be way too much detail.
We actually talked to the CIO
I would say that you would think that it's machine readable, and the formats that cover software bill of materials as bombs, like Cyclone DX and SPDX, do have the capability to provide that hardware information. However, most of the hardware bill of materials would be provided to somebody to spreadsheet today, because there's not technology that can easily recognize it, and there's not technology that can easily ingest it.
He beats it
like we're seeing there in software bill of materials.
So, do you have a sense for the percentage of vendors that are
I wouldn't necessarily frame it as a big or small problem.
In the critical infrastructure space, we are definitely being asked for them.
Same thing I always say about it.
For certain areas, and it's usually because of a regulatory. In the U.S., for example, if you're selling to the U.S. government, for many years, they've had something called the National Defense Authorization Act, and they made a Section 889 saying you can't be using Huawei in your business, you can't be selling anything with Huawei and other companies. And there's something coming in the future that they haven't written the whole rule on called Section 549. And that specifically lists certain Chinese chips. And so that's much more difficult because it's not only those companies providing you services, which in an HBOM it would show, but it also says the fourth party, like all their suppliers, will prevent machine possible. So from hardware bill of materials, we've got requests from government entities, also other asset owners and customers that are in critical infrastructure because they have to comply. But the usual, customer, let's say we sell products in manufacturing environments, they don't have
So we had very good turnout.
It is, and
especially in the regular.
and it will be
Again, some of this is
very
really,
difficult to bring together.
Yeah. So is that like the biggest use case that you
OT is a little
At this time, yes.
Yeah.
And then
It's from a traceability standpoint. Others, it's because the hardware bill of materials. Let's say I produce or Apple produces the iPhone in multiple locations. Well, they have a custom chip, that the main brains of it. But a lot of the products, whether it be a router or a laptop, some of those chips are just common components. So you could have different suppliers, and you could have different locations that those suppliers are buying from, even though it's the same chip. So that means on Monday, when that laptop is produced, could have a different set of chips on Thursday because they changed out the line. Or it could be different, if this one came from, assembled in Mexico versus one that might be assembled in Spain or whatever. And so the difference is when you ask for hardware bill of materials, there's many verifications because the manufacturing bill of materials changes. And so you really have to give the full aspect of what are the possibilities, but then those possibilities are just statistically mad, where it's like you can have X number of combinations. So finding out exactly what's on that one has to be figured out correctly on the line, and manufacturing processes in general, not tracing this is the exact serial number that went into that one.
Granularity sounds like it makes it really complex.
It is. And understanding and what we need is really more of a collective group to work on the hardware bill of materials, talk about how do we handle this. There is a framework that was documented through the CISA Supply Chain Risk Management Group, and that document's available on the CISA website. The provider has done some documentation. Really to focus on semiconductor manufacturing, and I'm talking more about commercial products that have multiple chips coming from who knows where.
Right.
It's a way for people to think about that.
And in terms of adoption on the vendor side, the reason they would be hesitant is having like proprietary stuff they wouldn't want to share, or is that?
Well,
start thinking about
I would say you could say there's proprietary information, but if you open up that item, you can usually tell what's in there. The reason is that
and it'll help you
it's
solve
more
10% of
complicated
what
to
you
pull
need.
than almost everything, because that information could be in the enterprise resource
You can
planning
say, if
systems
you do
of
these
their
integrations while you're doing it,
systems
there's
and
already
they
a
could have
dashboard you
multiple,
find, so
maybe
you
in the
get,
manufacturing line, like I said,
just-
you could have multiple
it's a
chips and
seamless
suppliers.
solving of that problem.
And
versus
then there's
now I have to
information
stand up a new
that
program
can
to address
change
something and plan
based off
you gotta
of the
find
supplier
something.
data, which they might not tell
That-
you. So
that's
let's say
the
you're
part.
buying a chip
If you make it
from a certain
its
supplier
own
for this
thing,
part
right?
number, and they have been manufacturing what's called front end and back end. There's two different main processes where there could be cyber risk injected, as part of the process. And we've heard opportunity to board the risk for semiconductor manufacturing. And let's say 1 month they're producing in Malaysia and then Taiwan for the front end and back end, and then they decide to manufacture.
Again, some of this is really.
And so how does the supplier give us that updated information? So we've got a whole process flow that gets very complicated.
And the good thing
And
is
the
that
systems that are managing these ERPs and such
Yeah.
are not really coordinated between thousands of
Be able to
suppliers.
sort of have that.
So are there certain features that matter more maybe than others, like standardized naming or other kinds of formats?
That's our push.
Yeah, it can be very difficult for a part because if there is just, let's just say chips that are not the most current technologies like we see now with AI and thank you very much phones and such. A lot of these industrial products or regular IoT products are even chips that were designed a decade or more ago, and there's not any intellectual property associated with that. And so multiple suppliers can create a similar chip. And so when you're working with all of this, the naming of that part number could be the exact same part with different part numbers and different suppliers. So with software, we've already had a hard enough problem saying that came from that supplier, whether it be Apple or Apple Inc. or this or that, because they buy other companies.
Sure.
Well, in this world, not only can they buy other companies, but they can relabel the exact same product to their own. So, like a white labeling or something else. So it has the same engineering specs, but a totally different partner. So you really don't know where it's, what its real origin is.
So what are some of the risks that bring to the surface? And an addiction, is a backdoor. That's always the famous example.
Well, and it absolutely can be from a standpoint of let's just say the compliance, being able to delicately put this, there are nation states that may be attempting to implement backdoors into chips. And so understanding where those chips are manufactured, which is, you can only have that. The U.S. has created some lists that I mentioned before that said, you need to be concerned. But those can change. It can be a shell game. And so that risk continues to grow. And it's not where every single chip has an RFID tag and it's easily identifiable. So there is risk that can be put into the chips. And it's a supply chain, so things move around. Things happen when you go to or get what you're doing. So just with the work that we've done for counter-based protection in the past, we need to think of the same thing and go beyond that with cyber.
So,